F sharp, A sharp, revisited.
Hello everyone and welcome to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited, the music review podcast where we look to the new music releases for something to talk about. I am Joe, the music critic split personality, and with me is a man with a harmonica. Do you have a harmonica?
I do actually.
Oh,
It's
lovely.
up there somewhere.
Go and play some for us.
You keep talking while I find it.
And for those who don't know, that's an Ennio Morricone reference, Once Upon a Time in the West, and we are going to talk about some new releases.
Where's my damn harmonica?
Great soundtrack.
I can't find the harmonica.
Oh,
This is
no.
a sad day.
So the first album we've got to talk about, Czarface and MF Doom, nice collab album they've put together for us to enjoy.
Yep, so Czarface is the combination of underground hip-hop duo 7L and Esoteric and Wu-Tang Clan member Inspector Deck, also meeting famous, quite influential rapper MF Doom on this project. It sort of makes sense that they're, making a collab, seeing as Czarface sort of took a lot of their ideas, themes, shtick in general from MF Doom. And I think both have released lesser quality output recently. So seeing how their efforts will collaborate.
Yeah,
Seems
see if
like
that'll make a spark fly. Or
seems like a good idea. This album is called Czarface meets Metalface because, Metalface Doom.
Mm-hmm.
It's 16 tracks, 44 minutes long. So it's very much your typical East Coast hip hop, sort of taking from. I mean, this album wears its influences on its sleeve, I think.
It does.
I mean, not only does it take influence from MF Doom, but also from Wu-Tang Clan, which I guess makes sense seeing as Inspector Deck is a prominent member.
From there. Yeah.
Yeah, this album, I mean, I liked it, but
Yeah.
this is on my feelings.
I think the but is really because it's not really breaking any boundaries. It's not presenting anything new. But for me personally, I was entertained by it.
It's
pretty much.
I mean, it's a very I don't want to say cinematic, more comic book like.
It's comic book.
There are a lot of skits and references to quite nerdy things throughout it, I think. Yeah. And there's the whole sort of Czarface as this hero with the classic 1970s, announcer like Czarface goes up against the Chrome Pharaoh and lots of pew 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 noises and like copied from MF Doom, but what can you do? It's entertaining.
Yeah.
There are some good skits on this album. There's one which is just about someone selling masks to superheroes, which is quite fun. As far as the actual songs go, I'm going to be honest, there really weren't that many that stood out to me. I thought that they were all sort of decent to listen to, but I don't think I'm going to get much out of them on repeated listens.
Yeah, I definitely felt that with some of the lyrics on the album. None of them were really standing out to me that much. I mean, they're good rappers, but some of their verses I don't think were really the strongest they've ever done. I think for me, the appeal of this album is more so in the. I mean, you said cinematic instrumentation. I kind of agree with that. And it just, to me, this album is more of a mood album. If I want to feel a little bit nerdy and just get involved with just indulge myself in the nerdiness of it, then it's something I can really quite enjoy.
References to, comic book heroes and Infinity Stones and the like throughout the album. References to various movies. It's fine.
Yeah.
In that sense. As far as the performances go, I mean, the styles of the different rappers collate quite well, but there isn't really much cohesion between their verses.
Yeah.
I feel like...
Yeah, I found that as well.
I feel like it... you're watching like an animated film and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, they all recorded their lines at different times in different places and they weren't really talking to each other. That's sort of how I feel on this album.
Yeah, it definitely comes across on tracks like Badness of Madness, I thought.
Yeah, and another thing that I found to be a problem with the album is that because of how sort of theatrical the backings are, the beats, at times the mixing of the album sort of muted the diction of a lot of the verses from the rappers for me, so I was finding it quite difficult to, if I wanted to, focus on what was being said.
I did, yeah, I did hear that on some of the tracks. I don't think that was a huge problem for me, but I think that's because with this album I am focusing more on the mood and the instrumentation rather than the lyrics, if I'm gonna be honest.
Because there's some very good instrumentation on here. There's lots of eerie pianos and strings contrasted with these mucky, quite hard drum loops and nuanced upbeat percussive elements. And then the one track which I actually felt I could pick out was Bomb Throne, which is
my favourite
lead single. It's got this wonderful backing choir. Yeah. And it's sort of the only truly memorable non-skit track on the album for me, which is a bit of a shame. Also got one of the only lines I could pick out as being memorable, which was, generally speaking, each rhyme is 5-star, split personality, I ride with a sidecar, which made me chuckle.
Yeah, and just another note, I love the jazzy brass and electric piano at the end of that song.
I mean,
it works really well.
I like it. It's nice. I just didn't. It doesn't really fit with the rest of the album, which is a bit of a shame. I would have liked it to sort of lead on to the next track a bit more.
I can see that. Another highlight for me was the second track, Meddle with Metal. I just really enjoyed that.
Doom. Zah, doom. Yeah, now that you mention it, that one does stand out as well.
That's catchy. I love that. And it just feels so RPG as well. It's very charming. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, like I've said though, there aren't really that many tracks on this album that stand out to me, and I've listened to this more than any other album we're going to be covering today because it's been out the longest, and I mean, I just don't really want to. It doesn't make me want to come back to it. Not because I think it's bad, but just because I doubt I'll get anything more out of it from repeated listens.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I'm not coming back to this album thinking I'm going to pay close attention to it. I'm going to come back to this album to think, oh, this was enjoyable.
Yeah.
I'll put this on again in the background when, doing something else. I mean, it's a good album, but...
It's a shame because I feel like Czarface, I mean... Their album Every Hero Needs a Villain I thought was fantastic, and the song Lumberjack Match from it is one of my favourite hip-hop tracks of this decade, possibly the 21st century, which it's a shame that there's nothing that's that striking on this album. And Doom, I mean, yeah, I guess Doom has released such great material in the past that it's hard to expect him to be able to reach those heights again in a way.
Yeah.
How the mighty have fallen, I guess. He's fine.
It sounds so harsh.
That sounds much harsher than it is, because Doom is good on this album.
Yeah.
Don't think he's, amazing, but
yeah,
he works well with the whole vibe.
Yeah. I think we're ready to wrap this one.
Yeah.
Wrap this one up. I rate this a good album out of 10, like 6 maybe to 7 on a good day out of 10. So.
Yeah, sort of same for me. Good album.
Yeah, good album, but not really a lot.
Good album, but not great.
Yeah, listen to the highlights though. Listen to Meddle with Metal and Bomb Throne is what I'm going to say.
I would completely agree with you. I wouldn't even say there's any particularly bad tracks on the album. There's just less memorable ones.
Yeah, true.
One down. Cook that cat in the salty broth.
Is that an original phrase? Or?
I might have heard it somewhere. I don't know.
I'll have to Google that later. That might just be the most random thing you've ever said. So let's move on to the next album, America by 30 Seconds to Mars. And
we have to.
Yeah. I've always thought 30 Seconds to Mars is a pretty cool band name. Just too bad about
I was reading up about the origins of the band, and on their first album that no one really listened to, I mean, a lot of the lyrics were sort of based around this concept of space and time. Not that I've actually listened to it, and
neither have I.
I reckon Jared Leto nowadays probably makes up all sorts of crap about what 30 Seconds to Mars means without acknowledging the original album, because just they've gone so far away from what they used to sound like, and not in a good way.
No,
they've gone full Fall Out Boy with this one.
This isn't full Fall Out Boy. This is worse.
Okay, I don't agree that it's worse, but I don't think it's much better.
At least with Fall Out Boy, at least with their album, they gave it some conviction. This is the most vapid, atrocious pile of shit I've heard all
Yeah.
year. And I listen to Migos. And while they're more boring, this is more bad.
I disagree, but I'm willing to hear you rant because that's always fun. They've completely regressed in any talent they had. Most of the band members just aren't even noticeable on this album. The drums are just hidden behind electronic beats. Guitar work is pretty much non-existent. All you're left with is Jared Leto's really just so uninspiring vocal melodies, really hollow singing, and he goes down the Black Veil Bride's route of choruses, which is just the song name with whoa, whoa.
Oh, it's so obnoxious. And honestly, the worst thing about this album is that they've taken away, you know what, pop music isn't necessarily bad, but they pander so hard to mainstream sensibilities that it gave me a headache just listening to this. In fact, this is the first album this year that made me feel like I wanted to vomit. That, like, when I highlight my song titles, I usually use red for when a song is terrible.
Red, yellow.
I had to come up with a new colour for Rescue Me. That song is quite possibly one of the worst songs I've ever heard.
That's not my least favourite on the album.
I don't know how, because that drop after the chorus is the most obnoxious thing I have ever heard in all my life. He's like, rescue me, fade out into this just so ugly. It's a monstrosity. The vocal manipulations under this electronic wave is so fucking ugly. It literally did make me want to vomit.
For me, nothing on this album is as bad as Church was on Fallout
Church
Boy,
was great,
to be honest. But no, my least favourite track is Dawn Will Rise, because it's got that cringe-inducing spoken word French intro, and then the auto-tune that's just persistent throughout the entire song. It's so badly done, it kind of hurts to hear. And while the entire song, like, the song starts off airy and dull, and then it rises and becomes airy and dull, and then it sort of drops towards the end and becomes airy and dull. I just think it's sounding like I'm saying it's an airy and dull.
Yeah, I mean, one of my notes on that song is just so generic and dull.
It's really hollow. And it just pissed me off listening to it, honestly.
Okay, well, another thing that pissed me off about this album is that the first track, combined with the album title, America, and the track's called Walk on Water, with the lyrics, made it feel like this album was going to have a bit of a political theme to it.
Yeah, it does make me wonder whether the band members actually think they're creating something inspiring with this album, considering how crowd-pleasing it is.
Okay. Let me just read out some of the lyrics to Walk on Water. Look at the sky, see a dying star, white lies, it's a man on fire, making love with the devil hurts, times are changing, a thin line, the whole truth, the far right, the left view, breaking all those promises made, times are changing, do you believe that you can walk on water? What a load of incoherent trite. And not only that, but it kind of feels like it's leading on to a political theme, which it seems like it's the popular thing to do, to be socially savvy on all this stuff with your albums, but then it just feels like he's jumping onto a bandwagon because the rest of the songs got nothing to do with it. It feels so misleading, and it feels so bandwagon jumping that I just...
Yeah, and it's got the features from Halsey and A$AP Rocky to try and get even more people on board.
Come on, we're mainstream. I mean, look at us, we're so mainstream.
I can't even remember what their album was called, A Beautiful Lie or something. At that period, if you'd told me that in the future they were going to be doing collaborations with A$AP Rocky, I just wouldn't have believed you. But this is just... I mean, it's selling out, really, isn't it?
It's selling out in the worst possible way.
I'm gonna play. I don't want to. It's not really devil's advocate because I'm trying to point out something nice with the album. The song "Remedy," I didn't think was bad. It's a simple and refreshing acoustic piece. It's got a sort of nice, smooth melody and rhythmic bounce. But it's mostly just refreshing to have some quiet on the album, I think. Yeah,
that was one of my points. If you manage to get to the last 3 tracks of the album, they're somewhat not as terrible as the rest of the songs.
Yes, I think it's because there's no use of space in the previous tracks. Every single part of the song is just full of the most watered down, hollow but loud
Yeah.
like sections of music imaginable.
Yeah, and they're always trying to rush to get to that drop or to that big moment that completely
it's another
falls
one.
flat.
It's another album. Like I mentioned last podcast with Jack White, he seems like an artist that wants to get from moment to moment with little care for what happens in between. And I feel like that's the same with this album, except the moments are just completely overblown.
Yeah, I have to agree. I don't have that much else to say. Do I want to go into my point about Björk on this album?
Of course you made it.
Well, there was a point in this album, Love is Madness, which actually isn't the worst song on the album, but when you make a song that sounds like a song from another artist, and when the other artist does this song and it's absolutely spectacular. I don't know if you've listened to Vulnicura yet by Björk.
I have not.
I think her 2015 album, I want to say.
Yeah.
There's one of my favourite moments in her entire career is on that album in the song Mouth Mantra, where these like glitchy electronics
That's such a Björk song title.
It is, but it is fantastic. You got these glitchy electronics, these strings that are very aleatoric, it seems very unstructured, and you're getting into Björk's mindscape as she's trying to figure out her mouth to say what she wants to say, and then all of a sudden these elements are taken away and you've got this blast of a drop, and it is so impactful, it is so good, and it's so damn satisfying because it actually relates to the lyrics and the mood and what she's feeling and what she's trying to convey, and it's very powerful. And in the song on this 30 Seconds to Mars album, Love is Madness, you get this very similar kind of drop where you got this blast of noise and then it cuts to silence and then blast of noise again, but it just feels so completely hollow. And me being a Björk fan and a fan of music in general, how can I not compare the two and just think, well, this is it done incredibly well, and then this on 30 Seconds to Mars is it done just so utterly shallowly that it just gives me a headache to think about. Why did he think this was acceptable on this album? I do not know.
Just I'm sorry, it's always amazing when you make Björk rants. Just one more thing I want to mention is, I mean, we're talking about the fact that this album is just jumping on so many bandwagons. Did you ever see what the actual cover art was for the albums?
There were just like lines of words.
And they made 10 different ones.
Yeah, I saw different ones. I didn't know if there was just one official one or...
No, there's 10 different ones that pop up all over the place. And I think they're meant to, like, they could say all they want that their statements on modern America, but in reality, they've just listed off words that are sort of relevant at the moment, which I think just sort of sums up this album.
Yeah, trying to be relevant.
Yeah.
It's not relevant.
No, it's just bad.
It is BAD. And you know what? On Jared Leto, he is going in the gulag.
Yeah, I think he is. I didn't even like his performance, which won him an Oscar. So he can definitely go in the gulag for me.
Okay. Gulag out of 10. I mean, if you want me to give it a number, strong 1 to a light 2. That's the lowest score I've given on this podcast.
I think it gets a, just gulag out of 10 for me as well.
Don't listen to it unless you really want to torture yourself. In fact, listen to it. I don't want to be like one of 2 people who have listened to it and have been tortured by it.
Yeah. Oh, it's just...
Yeah.
I don't want them to make music ever again.
Neither do I, and I rarely say anything like that, because I think people can change, but this album is a huge signifier that they do not care about the music anymore.
It's been a long time coming, to be honest.
I mean, yeah.
They've been watching their sound down more and more for just the longest time now.
Yeah, please don't write another album unless you're going to write something good again. Just don't. Please don't.
Joe.
Not once ever. Yes.
Do you like listening to music?
Yes.
Do you want to listen to the cover you made me do?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please.
As you may or may not remember, on the last podcast, I set a quiz, which Joe utterly just destroyed. So he's made me cover a song of his choice. He made me cover
Stupid Things That Mean the World by Tim Bowness.
Yep. Every single person I've said that I'm covering that to has said who. And actually this song doesn't exist on YouTube. So I had to go into the deepest, darkest depths of Spotify to find it.
I'm not a hipster, I swear.
You are 100% a hipster. World's biggest hipster. Well, now I am going to have to play this for you.
I look forward to it.
I think it went pretty well, all things considered. So, enjoy. Lost the plot before the plot was hatched. A make-weight friend and lousy catch. Car crashed mind, one of a kind. My enemy, my perfect match. And I miss you, but I still think about the times when stupid things could mean the world. I believed in the things that you believed in, stupid things that meant the world. I shouted loudest, though you shouted first. I raised the volume until the magic burst. Train wreck song with changing goals. Too self-absorbed to sense the heart. I still miss you, but I still think about the times when stupid things could mean the world. I believed in whatever you believed in, the stupid things that mean the world.
So I really appreciated the piece work that you put in on that, Nick.
Thank you.
I really liked it, and I liked the synth element in the chorus because the original song had a string arrangement. You obviously didn't have a string quartet with you. So yeah, I really liked it.
The thing I was going for is the original song's verses don't have much chord work in them. It's all bass.
Yeah.
So I thought I'm not going to be able to carry a song using just a bass and my voice, but in the verses, I will try and get sections where it's that. And then I thought, well, how can I change it up a bit? Okay, I'll get the chords from the chorus, I'll put them over the verse, but I'll do it so it goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the chorus section. Then I made up the guitar riff, and it all just went from there.
Yeah, and I like the guitar interludes in the verses as well.
Thank you.
Split it up a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I love the original song because it's one of my favourite songs of that year. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. And a nice little solo at the end as well.
I tried my best. Did you hear the bass solo that was going on underneath it?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I appreciate your solos.
I've realised that I've realised that recording bass parts is always my favourite part of any song that I record, because there's just so much you can do with it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I like recording guitar, even though I'm not a guitarist and I'm terrible at guitar. I always find it really, which is strange me saying this because I'm a bassist, but I like doing guitar when I can actually do it well. I could just do some screeching solo. I'm just like, yes, I can put tons of audacity and juice distortion on this.
Yeah, that's something I've learned. If you put distortion on guitar parts, whatever you play can sound good.
It can sound good.
Yeah. Just make everything sound as screechy as possible and claim it's art.
See, we know all the tricks in the trade now.
Yeah. We should go and write an album right now.
Agreed.
You know who else has made an album? Segue.
Oh, I don't know, Nick. Who has made an album?
Well, I will tell you, Joe, who has made an album.
Because I really want to know who's made an album.
Yeah, because okay, so I thought that this week we would take a little bit of a detour from our usual music fare and do something we haven't actually covered yet on this podcast, which is a comedy album. There is a comedy group called Aunty Donna, which I've been following for a few years now. They are Melbourne-based, sort of mainly comprising of the most visible people, which are Broden Kelly, Zach Ruane and Mark Bonanno, even though there are other people, behind the scenes on their work. Primarily a sketch comedy group. Something that I found interesting with them is that they are quite hit and miss, but I think that when they do hit, they often hit really hard. So that's why I still sort of follow them. And they've decided that they are that far along in their comedy career now that they can make a comedy album.
Yeah.
So they've made the amazingly titled Aunty Donna the album.
10 out of 10 title.
Yeah. 16 songs, 39 minutes long. So I was trying to think of how best to approach this, seeing as we haven't actually covered a comedy album yet before.
Well, the thing is, I kind of don't want to spoil all the jokes on it in case... I think listening to this review, you might have to expect that there will be a few spoilers, but we'll try not to spoil everything.
For all the songs I've mentioned, I have actually written down my favourite line from each one in the sections. What I'll say is, much like the group, I think this album is hit and miss, but it is more hit than miss. And when it does hit, I think it generally is a very funny album. The sort of comedy on it is quite absurdist and somewhat immature, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think that it works. I mean, I've thought that the members of the group have always had really good chemistry with each other, and I think their performances don't really let up on the album. I think when, like, on the odd occasion that they do, when one member is less good than the others, someone else will step up to carry the song, which I think is, great, because there are parts of this album where I think that some members are lacking just a little bit. As far as the songs themselves go, compositional and production-wise, I think they're actually pretty damn good. The production on the album, I think,
the production's
is
good, definitely.
pretty good throughout, which is, great. One thing I'd say, the actual songs throughout the album, I think are, for the most part, pretty good. I think it's the sort of interlude tracks and the skits where I think it sort of falls short a bit.
I would agree. For most of the songs, I think when it comes to their compositions, they do have good sense of comedic timing, and that's what makes the rather than like huge musical elements. You wouldn't really expect it from an album like this. It does thrive on them being comedians, and I do think that translates well into the music.
Yeah, the genres that they've picked for each individual song, for each concept in the song, I think generally fits really well. Like, for example, on the first proper track on it, Dad's Song.
That's one of my favourite songs.
Chuffed.
There's something just inherently funny about a dad
Dads.
being chuffed about things to trap, basically. So yeah,
that is a very good track. I got a wife and kids, and they make me chuffed. There's just something funny about dad culture, I guess.
Yeah, like even if I never become a dad, I want to be like very involved in dad culture.
Discount Snickers get me chuffed.
Oh yes,
I've got a synonym book and it makes me pleased.
Those things already do make me chuffed and pleased.
Yeah,
I'm already a dad.
But
another highlight for me was the track that came after it as well, Fuckboy Anthem.
Fuckboy Anthem's probably my favourite on the album, just because of how absurd it is.
Yeah.
The imagery that's created in that song is fantastic, and I love the performance from a sort of Mark in the lead role, and the backing vocals emphasising the words fuck and boy throughout. It's great. And then I've got my favourite line on the album written down, which is fuck boys, fuck boys, fuck boys, fuck. A fuck boy is half boy and half fuck. They wear 20 shoes when they walk down the street, because a fuckboy can't fuck if he's got cold feet.
It's just funny. It's funny. I don't want to spoil any more, other than the line, "You've eaten nothing but memes for a week." That did make me laugh.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to take this moment to mention one problem I have with the album, which is that I think that the positioning of the songs on the album isn't amazing at times. A big problem I sort of found with it is that, for example, Dad's Song is the first proper track of the album. It comes after the opening track, the Silly Sound song, which is, entertaining.
Yeah, it is what it says on the tin.
Yeah, it uses a slide whistle to sort of emulate the rising just before a drop, and the drop is just a huge fart sound. It's as immature as it sounds, but anyway, I think Dad's Song isn't the best choice to sort of introduce the members of the group on the album. As, for example, Zach he's got a small part where he pretends to be a doctor, which doesn't really get across what sort of a person he is throughout the rest of the album. Mark Bonanno's part, he's putting on this really heavy Italian accent and rapping about dough. I don't think I think it could have come later on the album, made it a bit more effective. Maybe started off with Fuckboy Anthem, who knows. And then the other problem I have, which is sort of more of a problem, is that one of the tracks on the album is actually the theme music they use for their sketch show, the Aunty Donna theme, which is a dubstep track. And for some reason they've put it... I mean, it's not a comedy song, so it's weird having it on this album, especially because they put it at a point where... You'd sort of expect it to come at the end of the album, wouldn't you? But then after that, there's another song that comes along, and then there's the secret track at the end. I mean, it's fine coming before that, but it just sort of detracts from the flow of the album for me.
I can see that. I mean, I didn't particularly have a problem with that. I kind of thought that the joke at that point was that dubstep is so a decade ago at the moment.
No, I think it's because
that's the joke.
That's the theme they composed when they got into the scene, and that's what was popular at the time. So it's I think it's fine being on the album.
I think the misplacement on the album works because it is funny, because it is a misplacement. But I think it's one of those things where it's a comedy album, so the general rules of songwriting, if there are any, don't really apply quite as much here, and things that can be interpreted as bad are supposed to be seen as funny. So
yeah,
it is a bit hard to really give.
I get what you mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Let's talk about some more tracks individually. Other favourite songs for me were "Best Day of My Life," which I think is great because it sort of captures the absurdity of how boring school life is perfectly with the things they're talking about. Somehow they make just the most average things quite funny on that track. And then
it's also making fun of teenage hyperbole as well. So it's like a double joke in that way.
And the variety between the short and long verses creates great comic timing.
Yeah,
definitely. Moving into a single line verse of "I hit Andrew with my stick." That made me laugh.
Best day of my life.
Yeah. My favourite verse on it though, and I've got to read the whole one because this one made me laugh so much. Friday was a casual day to raise funds for Sedan or some shit. Tim showed up in his uniform and we were like, "You're in your uniform," and he was like, "I don't even care," but he did care because he called his mom and she brought him a Billabong top, but we still called him uniform. Can we say the C word?
I've said the F word twice today,
Yeah,
so
let's drop the fuck bomb and the cunt word.
Yeah. Right.
And I'd also like to give a shout out to walking in on someone doing a poo, which the first time I listened to it, I thought was just crass and not funny at all. But then as the song goes on, it just forces the joke so much that eventually I just couldn't help but laugh.
Okay, that's probably one that didn't do it so much for me.
I don't know. But... It just the repeated changes in singing style and backing. After a while, it just got to me, and I do find it really funny now.
Yeah,
probably shows how immature I am.
Yeah, I mean, one weird thing about one of the songs on the album, Chop Chop, was that when I first, because I hadn't seen the video for it, the first time I experienced this song was listening to it. I felt like it needed some of the visual cues with the lyrics.
See, I saw the video first because they were putting up videos for their songs before the album was released, and I completely agreed when I was watching it. I thought, on the album, this isn't going to work as well.
Like, it was funny, the argument that happens, like, in the third act of the song. Songs even have acts. Was still funny on the album. I still enjoyed it, but like the first 2 minutes of it was a little bit kind of disorientating. You don't really know what's going on.
Yeah,
but
and it gets a bit repetitive as well.
Yeah,
in the middle. The same I'd say for the interlude track, "I'll Be There For You," theme from Friends, which I think is funny in theory, but it just goes on a little bit too long.
Yeah.
And then the song that I've got the actual song I've got the biggest problems with is "The Best Freestylers in the World."
Oh, see, I liked that one because it was making fun of brag rap.
Yeah, I suppose I do like it, but I do think that after the first. I mean, the jokes in it are very predictable. You know that they're just going to be terrible.
Yeah.
And I think that Mark's verse at the beginning is quite funny about, "I've got loads of cars and planes, so I'm going to put my cars in a plane, then a plane in a bigger car, and then I'm going to put that plane in a truck, and I'm going to have 50 dogs. I thought that was really funny, but then, I don't know, Broden's rap at the end about all the different people he knew, I didn't find it funny. I did like the choruses with lines like, "Put your hands up for the greatest in the world. We only eat Sumatran tigers. There are less than 400 left in the world." To which someone in the background shouts, "But we spit out the bones." That made me laugh. And during Zach's verse where he's talking about how he wants to be a gangster and go to JJ's to get, really expensive pants, and his mom says it's $70 for pants there, and someone in the background shouts, "That's too much for pants." That's fine. I didn't like the verses particularly on that one.
Okay.
The only other track that I've got to say anything about is "Phone Call," which is a skit that follows on from that, where he's calling up Broden's calling up one of the people he's referenced in the track to say, "Can I use your name?" And then they get into an argument about which one of them is better. Just didn't do anything for me.
I mean, I got the humour in that one, but I did feel like it was expended after the first listen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that can be that way with some comedy.
But while some of the songs I don't find as good as others, there isn't a single song on here that I won't listen to. I mean, even songs like Professor Whiskers, which I think loses its joke pretty quickly because of how repetitive it is, I guess, in the jokes it's using. The backing to that is so catchy. And I just love listening to it.
I just like the hook of Professor Whiskers. It's so funny, and that does have one of my favourite lines in the album, but the vet injected only a cat and mount, so instead of dying he just flailed about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a bit of a longer song, but it has its moments, I think, anyway.
Overall, I enjoy this album a lot, I've got to say. I will happily listen to it over and over again, even if I think some of the songs are weaker than the other ones. And I haven't mentioned it, but actually the final track, the secret track, That's so catchy. It's been stuck in my head for the longest time. Just how many men named Jeff do you know? And I'm hoping that they don't do another comedy album, because I think, as they've mentioned in one of their songs, they probably wasted a lot of time and money making this, whereas a lot of people probably just aren't going to buy it. So please don't make another one, Aunty Donna.
Yeah, I enjoyed this album. I do think that some of the songs, for me, don't warrant really repeated listens. Like, I'll get the joke the first time, and then the second time it isn't funny. I found that on some of the skits and on some of the tracks as well. But it does have some clever humour in there as well. So I would rate this a give it a go out of 10.
Yeah, give it a go out of 10. I mean, definitely if you enjoy sort of absurdist, immature humour, you'll like this album, I reckon. But if you like your humour a bit more, I guess, witty,
yeah, a bit more highbrow maybe,
then you will not care for this album
probably
at all.
Won't. Yeah.
Let's move on and talk about Eels. Eels, do do do. Eels, do do.
Jellied
do.
eels.
Eels. Feel them in your heart, in your tummy, in your anus. Eels, do do do. Eels.
You done?
Eels.
So yeah, quirky indie band Eels have returned with another album, The Deconstruction.
Yeah, brainchild of Mark Everett.
Yeah, 15 songs, 42 minutes. So this album is about a relationship that's on the rocks, but he still loves her. There's something quite earnest and heartbreaking about this album. Whether that always translates in the songwriting is another question, but while I found this album a mixed bag, I did overall enjoy the highlights, like a lot, like heavily a lot. Like, one of the songs on here is one of my favourite songs of the year, but it's one of those albums where the quirks don't always serve it, if you know what I mean.
Do you want to hear my opinion? My opinion is I've heard this album at least 3 times already from the same artist. I don't think that... I mean, it's just... To me, it's just an Eels album, nothing more and nothing less. All the staples are there, the topics on self-loathing, a mixture of sly downbeat tracks and the faux happy upbeat numbers. For me, it feels like an Eels Mad Lib for songwriting.
I do think it's not a departure for the band at all.
I think Mark Everett's been talking about the same things for such a long time now and doing very similar compositions. I mean, the first thing I ever heard by Eels was actually a greatest hits album, and I still find myself going back to that more than any of their other albums because it just saves me a lot of time.
Yeah. I've not actually heard a greatest hits album by them, but I do think Eels are one of those bands where I don't find myself returning to their music all that often, even though I enjoy it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get that. I mean...
Should we talk about this album, though?
I don't think this album's like... It's not a hard listen, it's just not really rewarding for me on anything more than a surface level.
Okay.
Like, lead single Today's the Day could easily have been replaced by the track Losing Streak or Hey Man, Now You're Really Living from previous albums, and I probably wouldn't have noticed.
I have to agree that Today's the Day is one of the weaker... Well, I think it's one of the weaker songs on the album, not a great choice.
It's really dull,
not
lyrically and compositionally.
It's Saving Grace is the synth solo at the end, if I'm going to be honest. But yeah, I think it's just sometimes some of the quirky songwriting doesn't always serve the songs all that well, like the second track, Bone Dry.
Shooby dooby dooby doo.
It's just so weird having those shooby dooby doos about a song where he's describing someone sucking his blood. I mean, maybe it's supposed to be funny, but I found it bizarre, and at first I couldn't tell whether I liked it or didn't like it. I still haven't decided, if I'm going to be honest, and I felt the same about the song later on in the track, You Are the Shining Light. So it's got this Saw synth, which on first listen was really grating for me. But then I think I don't mind it, but then I just don't know. It just seems like a weird choice for the song. So there are a couple of tracks where the songwriting just didn't do it for me. And then there are a few other tracks as well, which are literally just a minute long.
Yeah, none of
And
those I felt were really necessary for the album.
same, you've got the quandary, a minute long. It's then never unpleasant,
No,
but
I just don't really see the point of them.
just a bit pointless. And then you've got as well Archie Goodnight, a 1 minute song about saying good night to Archie. It just seems underdeveloped. Like it's a sweet moment, but it is underdeveloped. Despite those problems I have with the album, there are some songs which I just think are absolutely lovely as well. Like Sweet Scorched Earth. I love listening to the strings on that track.
I'm just going to say
so
now,
nice.
you can read out all the track names you want on this album, and I'm not going to know what you're talking about because I just found it so hard to connect with the individual tracks on this album.
Oh, it's breaking my
I'm
heart
sorry.
because I do think there are some really, really good moments on this album.
With all I've said, I do kind of like Mark Everett. I like his voice, and his songs aren't necessarily bad. Just at this point, they're just so uninnovative and unoriginal that it's just a bit depressing.
Okay. Well, I found Sweet Scorched Earth to be very, very sweet, so I didn't find it depressing. And I also really liked the closing track as well, In Our Cathedral, which just has some really gorgeous synth sounds, really lovely organ, and his vocals were just really nice and, well, just nice on that track as well. I'll just talk about my favourite track on the album because you look a bit worn down by this album, Nick.
You tell me your favourite track. I'll go and listen to it again.
My favourite track on this album was Rusty Pipes, because the songwriting in this track really struck a chord with me. He uses vocalises and some really soft woodwind as the backing. It's so soft, it's so gorgeous, but then his voice is so husky over the top of it. It's like he's centralising himself as the rusty pipes in the song. So instead of him talking about like a rusty church pipe organ, he's really talking about himself. And when he sings lyrics like "I pray to the gods that it just won't get worse," it really struck a chord with me. It just made me think, oh, it got me in my heart. So I really loved that track. It's one of my favourites of the year, so that's definitely a highlight for me.
I can't say I've got any highlights. Okay. I can't say I've got any particular lowlights either, except for Today's the Day. But even then, that's not a terrible song. It's just
not bad.
It's just very safe.
Just very safe, very uninventive. But I do think there are some, inventive moments on the album as well. Just two more highlights for me. Be Hurt. I kind of like the lyrics to that one, even though they are quite simple. He does make a lot of hackneyed rhymes in this album, which at first was a bit of a problem, but sometimes it can be charming at the same time, I thought. So I liked that. Be Hurt, The World Can Take It, and So Can You. I liked that. And I also liked the opening track, The Deconstruction, as well, just because it sounds like a cross between an early Steve Hackett ballad and old school hip hop, which sounded weird, but for me it worked. That's a moment of where the weird songwriting just really worked for me. So closing thoughts. I think this album has problems, but to be honest, the problems kind of make up about less than 10 minutes of the runtime. So I don't want to be too unfair to the album.
To me, it depends on what you class as a problem.
Okay.
I think if you were to listen to this album in isolation, it's probably fine. But I think for me personally, having been exposed to much more of the Eels' discography...
From what I've heard from Eels, I don't think this is his best album, but I do think it stands on its own. So I give it a strong 6 to a light 7, because even though it does have faults, but I still really enjoyed it.
I'm going to personally say give this a miss out of 10.
Okay, well...
That's going to be my new scoring system. Things that aren't numerical out of 10.
Give it a miss.
If you've never heard Eels before, listen to it. You might love it. But I would also say if you've never listened to Eels before, go back and listen to Electroshock Blues, because that's a great album.
That is a true statement. But listen to the songs I've highlighted from this, because it does have highlights.
I'm sure it does, Joe. I'm sure it does. Not trying to belittle your opinion at all. Got one more to go, Joe. You ready for this?
One more. Let's go.
We're going to do something we've never done before, as far as I'm aware, and we're going to talk about 2 hip-hop albums in the space of one podcast.
True.
Don't think we've ever done that before, which is a crime.
Yeah. True. Well, it was law of averages. We haven't talked about hip-hop for, so far this year, and then we talked about XXX
yeah.
Tentacion, and then, like, all the
That doesn't
hip-hop
count.
releases are going to come all at once, aren't they?
That does not count. We're not going to talk about that man ever again. Good. So, I was recently linked an album by my friend Nathan. He said, listen to this, it's really good. And I listened to it, and I thought, I do not like this. That album was Jean Grae and Quelle Chris's Everything's Fine. They are they're a hip-hop duo at the moment in the sense that, they're a professional couple. They love each other, I assume.
Yeah.
Jean Grae has been working on solo material since the early 2000s. Quelle Chris has been, working a bit more recently than that. This album is sort of 15 tracks long, and it's 55 minutes. It's quite a long album, coming up to the hour mark. And when I first listened to this, I just did not get on with the flows of the performers at all. I thought the really sort of almost improvisational flow that's presented by both of the main rappers on this album, it sort of lags behind the beat quite a lot.
Yeah,
and
they have a very lucid
really
flow.
distracting.
Yeah.
But actually, the more I've listened to this album, the more I've grown to love it.
I feel like I'm somewhere in between. Half of these tracks are highlights for me, and then half I just don't really care for that much. So
I'll just say straight off that there's only one track on this album I'm not so sure about, and all the rest of them I do like a lot. I will have to listen to this album more, though, because I haven't had enough chance to listen to it to get a full, solid opinion on it. So I guess a good place to start with this album is just how eclectic it is. It's kind of zany in a way. Like, the record as a whole, I think, features quite a lot of interesting elements on it. Like, the beats and vibes on it are kind of quite eerie for the most part. They're never afraid to break up the groove of a track, but to throw a spanner in the works by switching up the beat. And I think the performances as well are sort of uniformly pretty good. There are no guest spots which stand out as being particularly bad to me. In fact, I think there are quite a few quite inspired choices for guest spots, like Hannibal Buress on the track Osh, Your Old Droog on A Scoop of Dirt, and my favourite on the album, Nick Offerman on the track Everything's Still Fine, because Nick Offerman has my favourite voice in the world.
he has an amazing voice.
I love him
That's
so
a
much.
fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just talking about Everything's Still Fine, I actually enjoyed all of the skits on this album, because sometimes skits can seem a little bit forced or break up the flow of an album where it's not necessary. Each one works. Like the opening track, Everything's Fine, the game show host saying there's only one answer to these questions, everything's fine. The world is ending, everything's fine. Like, they get their point across. Like, it's not a pointless skit.
They all connect to the sort of main theme of the album, which is nice. I feel like we haven't had an album that's done that for quite a long time now, or at least not one that we've talked about on the podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about Brockhampton, and all of their skits follow the same sort of...
It's quite formulaic,
It's quite formulaic and never really seems to fit in that well. I don't hate them, but... No, these I think work really well throughout. And I guess the sort of main themes throughout the album are this sort of sense of irony and poking fun at the sensitive spots of society. And there's just huge amounts of cynicism on this album, but also sort of spots of vulnerability throughout, about like the burden of life, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that Jean Grae has quickly become one of my favourite performers in the genre. I can only compare her to Milo, I guess. Right. I love her flows. I love her lyricism throughout.
Yeah.
She's got a great grasp of language. And she's got this really quite animated performance as well. She sings nicely as well. There's that.
Where does she sing?
Like, I mean, not sing as such, but the way that she inflects melody into her
right. Okay.
raps.
Yeah. I get you. Yeah, I get you.
I mean, I didn't put it very well there. I feel like you should say something now. I feel like I've talked a lot.
Well, I don't have a lot to say other than about like the full album. Other than I enjoyed the themes, I do think it's constructed well, and those come across strongly through the skits and how they relate to the meat of the songs as well. I do think that's a plus for the album for me. And then the rest of what I've got to say is which ones are the highlights and which ones I didn't like.
Yeah, well, I'll go on to say, I think the contrast between Chris's low-key delivery and the sort of animated chattering of Grae works in a sort of like yin and yang style way.
Oh, definitely.
They just play off each other exceedingly well. The lyrics throughout, I think, are pretty brilliant. They're super witty, complex, following the theme of the album with no unnecessary tangents. For example, on the track My Contribution to This Scam, which is sort of about, I mean, the things I've said before, poking fun at the sensitive spots of society. Jean Grae says, "You're dotting the whiz, you bring nothing, you ruin shit. Douchey axe body spray influences. Why I got a Deus Ex Machina things. I'm done doing this. Save yourself useless and tie the neck nooses. I'm tired semicolon sick. I done threw up the juices 86 time with no hint of shtick." I mean, it sounds great when she performs
Sounds
that.
great.
And it's just so nuanced and great.
Dynamic.
Scathing condemnation of bandwagons.
Yeah. And included in that song as well, there's YouTube reviewer, "Shut up, you contributed not a thing." So we're getting called out.
Yeah. We're the problems of society. But no, that song is strangely catchy despite not being obviously catchy. Every single time Chris goes, "My contribution to this scam," I find myself mouthing along with it.
It's hypnotic in that way. Yeah.
I'd like to go back to talking about the guest spots on the album because I think a lot of the time they're just hilarious. On the track Osh, which is now one of my favourites, you've got Hannibal Buress's verse, which it's just bizarre. One of the lines is, "I ain't got no fur coat, but I got a bag full of Merlot. I'm lying, I ain't got no fucking Merlot. I drink whiskey, but I do want a fur coat." That made me laugh a lot.
Yeah.
I reckon he was probably drunk when he wrote that and performed that. It really comes across. Then you got Scoop of Dirt with Your Old Droog, and his entire verse is just pretty much him shitting on himself for how out of shape he is. This is so unexpected and so funny.
Okay. But do you want to guess what my favourites on this album are?
Gold, Purple, Orange.
No, that was one of my least favourites.
Okay, that's
actually.
my favourite on the album. I can't
I
guess
think
otherwise.
your favourites are actually my least favourites on this album because for me, Gold, Purple, Orange, that bass line is not strong enough to last a verse, let alone 5 minutes.
I think it does. I loved the backing to that track. I think it plays off really well with the lyrics and the performance. I love the juxtaposition between Chris's verse on assumptions in society and Grae's verse about her life.
The verses are good. The verses are good, but for me, that backing got so old so quickly.
I just love how hazy and trippy it is.
I didn't, and I did find that to be the case on some of the other tracks. Like Osh, for me, had super boring instrumentation.
I think nearly all of the instrumentation on this album just scratches those itches I have.
Well, the thing is, half the time, the biggest problem for me with this album is that half the time I'm bored listening to the instrumentation, and even if they've got good verses, which I do like, I need that instrumentation to be catching me. Like Scoop of Dirt, I found it unlistenable, that really annoying repetitive synth going on for 3 minutes.
I find it interesting though.
I couldn't listen to it.
I find it interesting in this sense though that going back to Czarface, you find Bomb Throne to be one of the best tracks because the beat to that is repetitive throughout and never changes.
But it's vibrant and catchy.
I think that a lot of this album is catchy, to be honest.
I did not find... Okay, there are some good tracks. I'm not going to say...
Okay, if you have reverse favourite tracks to me, then by that logic, your favourite track is The Smoking Man.
No, I just didn't find it that much interesting.
Okay, because that's my least favourite track on the album. I don't think it's a terrible track, but I think it stands out the least of all the tracks on the album.
I think I'm agreed with you on that one.
The backing, I think, is one of the weaker points. Though I do think Denmark Vesey's verse on it is pretty good. I'd just like to go back again and mention Everything's Still Fine, just because I think it's such an amazing choice to have Nick Offerman just go, everything's fine.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about things. It's like, I don't.
Okay, well, I'll talk about which ones are my favourites then. probably my absolute favourite is the closing track, River.
Great track.
Lovely ambience, lovely use of strings and keys, lovely jazzy second section, and then the verses, when they come in, the lucid flows kind of match with the music, and it just feels great as a closer. So yeah, really enjoyed that track. And then I also really liked Zero and Peacock as well, because I felt like those had much more interesting backing elements.
The chord progression in Peacock is sublime.
It's lovely. It's lovely, and it's just got good such use of synth, and then changing up the rhythmic elements as the song goes on. It keeps it bouncing along, and I did think that Gene's verse in that one was really good as well. So yeah, another two favourites of mine.
I don't think there's a track on this album I hate at all, and in fact I think the more I listen to this album, probably the more I'm going to get out of it. For now, I've only managed to listen to it I think 3 times, so I'm going to give it a album of the week, but not sure by how much out of 10. I'd probably give it like a decent to like strong 8 at the moment.
I'm not quite as positive, just because there were quite a few tracks. I mean, 4 or 5 tracks that instrumentally I did find boring, and I found it difficult to listen to because of that. But I did think there are a lot of highlights. There are a lot of things to like about this album as well. So it's kind of in that like strong 6 to like 7 range as well, like Eels and Czarface and MF Doom. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this album. If it sounds like the kind of thing that you'd like, I would definitely recommend it and give it a go. I
would highly recommend this album, but I would also say that I guess kind of like Aunty Donna, you have to have a certain sense of humour to, I think, appreciate the lyrics, and you need to be ready for less than I've forgotten the musical term now for music that fits together well. Not dissonant, but
consonant.
Yeah,
or
consonant, I guess.
I'd say this is consonant. It's not really dissonant. That's
why I didn't want to use the word dissonant. I hope you're enjoying this conversation we're having, listeners.
While we try and find the right word.
It doesn't, it's not going to appeal to the masses, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, a lot of the instrumentation on it is quite eerie in a sense. That's it. We're done.
That's it. We're done. And
shout-outs.
We should talk about shout-outs.
Because there've been a lot of albums.
Been so many albums. I should have written down more of them, because... okay.
I've got 3.
Okay.
First of all, I've got Sister Cities by The Wonder Years. Sister Cities by The Wonder Years is good, but like with their other albums, I don't really understand why they're considered to be amazing. I get that they're probably better than the average pop-punk band, but at the same time, I don't think they're, the masterful.
Yeah. I haven't heard their recent album, but I did feel that way about some of their previous material I've listened to. I'm sorry if there are any fans out there listening, but like they're the kind of music where I think, this is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But
it's good, but it's not great.
Yeah, just nothing sticking out to me.
I will say that the track "Flowers Where Your Face Should Be" off Sister Cities is fantastic. That's one example of where I can think people would, give them this hyperbolic.
You make it sound like a disease.
I can understand the praise. As well as this, you got. I've listened to "Shrine" by the Republic of Wolves. Similar vein to Sister Cities, but probably a bit more cinematic in its sound. There are some good ideas on this album. There are some ideas that work less well. I think it's good. I don't think I'm going to listen to it again out of choice. And also the new...
Hop Along?
The new Hop Along, that was it. The new Hop Along album, which I've forgotten the name of, so you can look that up in your own time. I like Hop Along. I think that they're... I've mentioned that you should listen to them in a previous podcast when we were talking about... I can't even remember the name of the band we were talking about because they're that memorable. Adam suggested we listen to them. What were they called?
Oh, the punk
Yeah,
band. Oh,
I cannot for the life of me remember what that album was called because I just didn't really care for
I can't
it.
even remember the name of the artist. It was something simple though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Okay.
Hop Along's new album is pretty good. I think probably
Yeah.
as good as their last one.
Yeah,
So-
I have given it one listen because you said that it was something you were looking forward to, and I actually really enjoyed it. So
Yeah,
I
good.
don't I only listened to it once, so I don't really have any like huge opinions on it yet. But
Yeah, I need
it's
to listen
definitely one
to
I
it
want to
more.
return.
I've had a
return
lot
to,
of
yeah.
music to listen to. And
Yeah.
finally, Adrian Young's new album, which is another one I've forgotten the title
It's
of.
like presenting the voice of Gemma,
Yeah.
something
Good,
like that.
good album.
I liked that album, but I also thought that if this is Gemma singing, that was like the weakest element of the album, if I'm going to be completely honest, which is weird when the title of the album is presenting her voice, because I found the instrumentation to be pretty great throughout, but
Yeah.
so some of the singing was just kind of a bit average for me.
So I would probably recommend all of the things that we didn't talk about properly on the podcast. If you're into those genres of music, of course.
Yeah, because I've got two more shout outs. The Aces, all female pop rock group, sounds remarkably like Paramore in my opinion. So if you liked that's Paramore's most recent album, that is, then if you liked that, I would suggest giving it a go.
I had a dream the other night where I was a guitarist in the band Paramore and I met Hayley Williams and she was lovely and I got to perform on stage and then I woke up and I just resented being awake.
Ah, sounds amazing.
It was a lovely dream. It's making me sad thinking about it now.
What songs were you playing on stage?
I can't remember. It was one of those dreams where I was probably playing a song that isn't actually by Paramore.
Yeah,
You know,
it just sounds like
just
them.
one that was sort of a mash of all the different songs I'd heard that day in my head.
Yeah, it's put together.
I might well have been playing a track by, but I've forgotten the name of the band. But they did the album with Doom We Come.
Oh yeah, that.
This is the podcast of us just forgetting.
Yeah, just
album
forgetting. But the thing is,
titles.
I'm terrible at remembering
Summoning.
names.
There we go.
Yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
might have been playing a song by Summoning for all I know.
Yeah. I've got one last shout out. I listened to En Vogue's comeback album. It was pretty good.
Cool.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Albums I haven't got around to listening to this month include the new album by The Voids, which I've heard is good, but I can't comment. And also Kylie Minogue's new album in which she goes country, which I actually don't intend to listen to.
I listened to like 4 to 5 tracks on that one, and it's basically what Miley Cyrus did when she tried to go country in her last album. It's just a little bit pandering. It's not terrible. It's just, well, actually, Miley Cyrus was terrible. But you know, she was. It was just.
You've just reminded me of the Bo Burnham song. I think it's called Pandering, which is about country artists. I'll have to play that to you at some point, and I highly recommend anyone listening listen to that song because it's hilarious. So, what are we going to do with our ducks then?
With our ducks, so Czarface and MF Doom. I mean, I'll throw a bit of bread
I'll
their
give them a
way.
pat on the head.
Pat on the head, just a little bit of bread.
You made music. Well done.
Yes, well done. And, well, the Gulag is the destiny for Jared Leto and 30 Seconds to Mars.
Yep. They go into the special gulag with no bread.
Yes.
No bread in sight.
With bread extractors.
Yes.
So any that they might have gobbled up.
Yeah,
Nuh.
it just gets taken out of their body.
Yeah.
That sounds horrible, actually.
That's the point.
I'm going to give Aunty Donna a pat on the head as well, because while I liked their album, I don't want to encourage them to make another one.
I will, for Aunty Donna, I will arrange a symphony of quacking.
Yes. to the tune of the silly sound song.
Pretty much. I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I like that album. I do recommend it.
Yeah.
Eels.
Eels.
I don't really want to even talk to the duck because I don't want to do anything that might encourage him.
Because I liked 5 songs on the album I really liked, I'm going to give him some bread, but I'm going to tell him to be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah. Or write about something that isn't his own self-loathing for once.
Yeah, pretty much.
And finally, Jean Grae and Kelly Chris, if everything's fine, I'm just going to give them a loaf of bread.
I'm
not going to cut it up.
They can have to work for their meal.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them a pat on the head and a bit of bread. But again, I'm going to tell them to be a little bit more consistent. And then, yeah. But maybe that's just my taste in hip-hop speaking.
We've got a big shout-out, a big plug that we need to do now.
Yes.
Because we are going to be on Stacey, our good friend
Yes.
Stacey, who we love, and her podcast is so great. Joe, say it because I can never get the name right.
It is Stacey's Pop Culture Parlour.
Stacey's Pop Culture Parlour is doing a 24-hour-long live charity stream in which Stacey and Barry are going to be present for an hour, and we are going to be entertaining them for an hour from 3 o'clock until 4 o'clock on Saturday, the 28th of April. I recommend you all listen in. We've got fun and games and maybe an album review planned.
Yes.
And it's all for a great cause, of course.
British Heart Foundation. We'll put links in the this episode description, wherever we're going to put it, if you want to donate.
And I mean, all of those, all of the podcast will be available in chunks later on if you happen to miss it, so you can listen to us, listen to the entire thing. Recommend.
But if you listen to it, just try and donate just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just if you can.
Try,
come on,
just a little bit. Just
feed the ducks a little bit.
Feed those ducks. And I mean, we might have to plan something for the coming week because it's annoying that that's happening on that date because that is the 1 year anniversary of us having done F Sharp A Sharp Revisited. So we might plan something special for the following podcast.
We'll have a talk a bit later and see
what we can decide.
See what we decide.
But for now, it is quite a nice day, so we're going to go and get some fresh air.
Yes, we are.
I hope you have enjoyed this episode of F Sharp A Sharp Revisited as much as we have.
Yes, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
F Sharp A Sharp Revisited.